The great chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with the murmur of alien voices, a kaleidoscope of languages reverberating through the air. Delegates from over 100 star systems filled the room, their forms as varied as the planets they hailed from. Some glided on shimmering fins, while others moved with deliberate grace on limbs of chitin or crystalline tendrils. Yet all eyes turned toward a single figure at the center of the chamber. Commander Elena Voss, humanity's representative and the first Deathworlder to ever stand in this hall. Elena stood tall, her uniform crisp against the muted silver of her skin-tight exosuit. She scanned the room, her dark eyes betraying no emotion as she bore the weight of countless gazes. It was a look the humans had perfected, calm, unyielding, and silently daring. Even now, her heartbeat remained steady, though she could feel the quiet tension vibrating through the chamber. This was not admiration she faced, but curiosity laced with trepidation. Humanity was a new species on this stage, a mystery wrapped in centuries of conflict and survival on a planet the galaxy classified as a death world, a place of extremes, violence, and danger. The Council's Chancellor, a towering being of translucent gel-like mass, shifted forward. Its voice resonated in the minds of those present, smooth and measured. Humanity, though your achievements are undeniable, we find ourselves questioning the wisdom of your integration into our collective. Yours is a species that thrives on conflict. Your biology endures what others cannot. It is unsettling. A ripple of agreement moved through the crowd. Elena's jaw tightened ever so slightly, but she remained composed. Chancellor, survival is not aggression. The environments of Earth shaped us into what we are. Strength and endurance are not weapons unless circumstances demand them. A chitin-covered delegate clicked its mandibles, interrupting her. And yet, the tales of your people defy all understanding. You treat pain as a tool, a thing to be pushed aside. Such disregard for natural limits speaks of recklessness. Elena took a step forward, her voice calm yet firm. Pain, Counselor, is not something we disregard. We understand it intimately. It is our teacher and our warning. But it does not define us. What defines humanity is what we do despite the pain. The chamber quieted, her words hanging in the air like an unspoken challenge. For a moment, even the most vocal skeptics hesitated. Then, a sharp chime broke the silence, and the chamber's holographic interface flared to life. A distress call had been received. The projection expanded, revealing a mining colony on the edge of neutral space. Black smoke billowed from the structures, and emergency signals flickered in the chaos. A harried voice crackled through the transmission. This is Colony Lyrian 7. We are under attack. Unknown hostile forces, requesting immediate assistance. The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving only static. The Chancellor's gelatinous form rippled, its color darkening to deep blue. Lyrian 7 is critical to galactic trade. We cannot afford to lose it. Elena's posture straightened. Send a task force. Humanity has a team stationed there. We'll assist. Murmurs spread through the chamber once more, uncertain and hesitant. Finally, the Chancellor spoke. Very well. A mixed-species team will investigate. Commander Voss, your people will lead this mission. Ensure success. Elena inclined her head, her expression betraying none of the satisfaction she felt. Understood. The chamber emptied soon after, leaving only Elena and a few members of the human delegation. A man approached her, tall and broad-shouldered, his uniform identical to hers. Captain Darius Kwan, her second-in-command, carried an air of easy confidence that matched his sharp features. Looks like they're sending us straight into the fire, he remarked, his tone low. Wouldn't be the first time, Elena replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. Assemble the team. Make sure the aliens understand what they're walking into. Lyrian 7 isn't going to be a gentle introduction. Darius nodded. Think they're ready for a front-row seat to how Deathworlders operate. Elena's smile faded. They'll have to be. The journey to Lyrian 7 was tense. The mixed-species crew gathered in the briefing room aboard the human vessel Resolute. The aliens, representatives from 4 different species, kept their distance, their distrust evident. Elena addressed them with measured authority, outlining the mission parameters and the dangers of the mining colony's environment. High gravity, unstable terrain, and unpredictable weather patterns. One alien, a feathered being with iridescent plumage, raised a cautious hand. Commander Voss, if the situation is as perilous as you describe, should we not wait for reinforcements? Elena met its gaze evenly. If we wait, the colony will fall. And if that happens, the hostile forces will only grow stronger. We go now because we don't have the luxury of time. Another alien, a quadrupedal creature with a crystalline exoskeleton, shifted uneasily. But your people, you speak of resilience. You speak of enduring pain. Is that truly necessary? Can we not rely solely on technology and strategy? Elena's voice softened, though her words carried weight. Pain isn't something we choose. It's something we survive. And when survival means pushing beyond what we think is possible, we do it. That's what it means to be human. The room fell silent, the aliens exchanging uneasy glances. For them, pain was a rare and distant concept, something their advanced civilizations had long since eliminated. They could not fathom what it meant to live with it as a constant companion. As the Resolute neared Lyrian 7, the crew gathered in the observation deck, the planet's scarred surface coming into view. Smoke and fire marked the colony's desperate struggle, and the faint shimmer of energy shields flickered weakly against the relentless bombardment. The aliens stared in silent disbelief, while the humans prepared for the inevitable chaos. Elena stood at the front, her gaze fixed on the colony below. Her voice was steady, resolute. We're about to enter a battlefield. Follow your training, trust your instincts, and remember, pain is temporary. Survival is everything. Darius glanced at her, a smirk breaking through the tension. You always know how to make a first impression. Elena allowed herself a brief chuckle before turning back to the crew. Let's get to work. As the ship descended into the atmosphere, the rumble of turbulence mirrored the growing storm within the hearts of the alien delegates. They were about to witness humanity in its purest form, a species forged in fire, ready to show the galaxy what it meant to endure. And none of them would leave unchanged. The descent onto Lyrian 7 was far rougher than expected. The ship's hull groaned under the strain of the planet's gravity, and the turbulence rattled every bolt and panel. The alien members of the team clung to their harnesses, their expressions betraying unease. To them, even the landing felt like an impossible gamble. But to the humans, it was just another day on the job. Commander Elena Voss stood at the front of the transport bay, gripping a rail for balance as she addressed the team. Her voice carried over the din of the ship's engines, steady and authoritative. Touchdown in 60 seconds. The colony's external defenses are compromised, and enemy forces have taken control of several key zones. Our job is to secure the central power station and re-establish communications. Her gaze swept over the group, pausing briefly on each of the alien representatives. Their fear was palpable, but it wasn't fear that concerned her. It was hesitation. This will not be a clean operation, she continued, her tone firm but not unkind. Stick to your assignments. Trust your teammates. And remember, hesitation will get people killed. Darius Kwan, standing beside her, gave a grim smile as he double-checked his weapon. Don't worry, Commander. They'll catch on quick enough. The ship shuddered violently as it touched down on the surface, and the ramp hissed open to reveal a scene of chaos. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid tang of burning metal. The ground beneath their boots was uneven, jagged from years of mining operations, and the high gravity pressed down on them like an invisible weight. For the aliens, it was an immediate struggle to adapt. Even those with advanced exosuits stumbled under the oppressive force. Move out! Elena barked, her voice cutting through the cacophony. The team fanned out, humans at the forefront with aliens trailing behind. They advanced quickly, their boots crunching over fractured ground as they approached the colony's perimeter. The first signs of the enemy came in the form of distant flashes, streaks of plasma arcing through the air. Elena raised a fist, signaling the group to halt. Through the smoke, the attackers came into view, tall, skeletal figures cloaked in reflective armor that shimmered like liquid metal. Their movements were unnervingly smooth, almost serpentine, and their weapons hummed with energy. The aliens faltered, their nerves evident. A feathered diplomat muttered, What are those things?" Darius stepped forward, his rifle at the ready. "Hostiles. That's all you need to know." The first volley of fire was deafening, plasma bolts screaming past them and exploding against the ground in bursts of molten heat. The humans responded immediately, their rifles barking with precision as they returned fire. Elena ducked behind a piece of debris, her sharp commands keeping the team coordinated. "Suppressive fire on the left. Keep them pinned." The aliens, and used to combat, hesitated at first. One of them, a crystalline quadruped named Threll, clumsily fumbled with their weapon before finally managing to aim and fire. The recoil sent them stumbling, but the shot hit its mark, striking one of the attackers and sending it crumpling to the ground. Elena noticed and gave a quick nod. "Good shot, Threll. Keep it up." Despite their initial struggles, the aliens began to find their footing. The humans, meanwhile, moved like a well-oiled machine, their movements fluid and efficient. Even under heavy fire, they pressed forward, using the terrain to their advantage. But it wasn't without cost. A sudden explosion rocked the area, and one of the human soldiers, Corporal Hayes, was thrown violently to the ground. His leg twisted at an unnatural angle, and a pained groan escaped his lips. Before anyone could react, Elena was at his side, hauling him behind cover with a strength that seemed impossible under the planet's gravity. "Stay with me, Hayes," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. She tore open a medkit, applying a quick-acting coagulant to a gash on his arm before bracing his leg with a splint. "You're not done yet." Hayes gritted his teeth, his face pale with pain, but he managed a nod. "I can still shoot, Commander." "That's the spirit," Elena replied, her tone almost light. But her eyes flicked to the aliens nearby, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. She addressed them without missing a beat. "This is what we do. Pain is part of the job. We keep moving." The words hung in the air like a challenge, daring them to rise to the occasion. And slowly they did. Threll moved to cover Hayes, their crystalline body refracting light as they fired at the advancing enemies. Another alien, the feathered diplomat, darted forward to provide suppressive fire, their initial fear replaced by a grim determination. The battle raged on, the tide shifting as the mixed team began to work together. The humans' resilience and the aliens' adaptability forged a fragile but effective alliance. Step by step, they pushed toward the power station, each victory hard-earned and paid for in sweat and blood. As they reached the station's outer perimeter, Elena motioned for the team to halt. The building loomed ahead, its structure battered but intact. The entrance was heavily guarded, a cluster of enemy forces stationed around it. Elena turned to the group, her voice low but urgent. "This is it. We take that station, we take back the colony's lifeline. Stick to the plan. Cover each other, and don't stop until it's done." She didn't wait for a response. Leading by example, she charged forward, her rifle spitting fire as she moved. The others followed, humans and aliens alike, their fear overridden by the instinct to survive. Plasma bolts lit up the night, and the air was filled with the roar of weapons and the shouts of determination. By the time the dust settled, the power station was theirs. The enemy forces lay scattered, their reflective armor dulled and broken. The team stood amidst the wreckage, battered but victorious. Elena surveyed the scene, her face grim but resolute. "We're not done yet," she said, her voice carrying over the silence that followed the battle. "This was just the first step. Get ready. There's more to come." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of exhaustion and awe. For the first time, they began to understand what it meant to fight alongside Deathworlders. Pain was not the end for these humans. It was merely an obstacle to be overcome. As the team regrouped and prepared to push deeper into the colony, Elena allowed herself a brief moment to catch her breath. She looked to the horizon, where the faint glow of enemy activity still lingered, and steeled herself for the battles yet to come. None of them had any illusions about what lay ahead. But for the first time, the aliens felt a flicker of something unexpected. Hope. If the humans could endure this, perhaps they could too. And so, with renewed determination, they pressed on, each step bringing them closer to understanding the true strength of humanity and themselves. The power station hummed back to life, its systems groaning under the strain of restarting after such brutal sabotage. Emergency lights flickered in the dim interior, bathing the walls in a pulsing red glow. Elena stood at the control panel, her fingers flying over the interface as she worked to re-establish communications with the rest of the colony. The team was battered, their movements slower now, but their determination burned brighter than ever. Outside, the storm had intensified, dark clouds swirling violently in the sky. The high-gravity atmosphere crackled with energy, sending occasional bolts of lightning searing through the air. It was as if the planet itself was fighting against their presence. The aliens huddled near the station's walls, their postures weary but alert. Even now, they cast uneasy glances at the humans, their resilience both awe-inspiring and alien. Darius approached Elena, his rifle slung over one shoulder and his expression grim. "We've secured the perimeter, but the hostiles won't stay down for long. Any word from the colony?" Elena shook her head, frustration creeping into her voice. "The main communications array is fried. I can only get short-range signals up, and that won't help us call for reinforcements." Darius sighed, running a hand through his sweat-matted hair. "Figures. What's the plan, then?" She looked up at him, her eyes hard with resolve. "We go for the colony's command center. If we can take it back, we'll have access to their long-range transmitters. It's the only way to bring in support." Darius nodded, but his gaze lingered on her for a moment longer. "You sure about this, Commander?" The team's running on fumes. And the aliens, well, they're holding up, but barely. Elena's lips tightened, and she glanced at the rest of the group. Threll's crystalline exoskeleton was chipped in several places, and the feathered diplomat, Ralith, if she remembered correctly, was visibly shaking despite their attempts to mask it. Even the humans, accustomed to pushing past their limits, were beginning to show cracks. Hayes leaned heavily against a wall, his injured leg hastily splinted and bound, while another soldier tended to a burn on her arm. "We don't have a choice," Elena said finally. "If we stay here, we'll be overrun. We have to keep moving." Darius didn't argue. He knew better than to question her judgment, especially when the stakes were this high. "I'll get them ready." As the team regrouped, Elena addressed them once more. Her voice cut through the tension, steady and commanding. "I know you're tired. I know this hasn't been easy. But the fight isn't over yet. The command center is our next target, and it's not far. Once we take it back, we'll have the upper hand." Her gaze locked onto each member of the team in turn, lingering on the aliens. "You've seen what we're capable of. Now I need you to show me what you can do. We've made it this far together. Let's finish this." There was a brief silence. Then Threll stepped forward, their crystalline form catching the flickering light. "We will not falter, Commander. Not after what we've seen." Ralith followed suit, their feathers ruffling in what could only be interpreted as determination. "We will fight. Pain or no pain, we will fight." A faint smile touched Elena's lips. "Good. Let's move." The trek to the command center was grueling. The storm's winds had intensified, howling through the colony's shattered structures and whipping debris into the air. The uneven terrain made every step a challenge, and the high gravity drained their strength with every movement. Yet they pressed on, driven by the singular purpose of survival. They encountered resistance as they neared their destination. Hostile forces emerged from the shadows, their reflective armor shimmering in the storm's chaotic light. Plasma fire lit up the battlefield once more, and the team was forced to fight tooth and nail for every inch of ground. Elena led the charge, her rifle blazing as she advanced with relentless precision. Her movements were calculated, each step purposeful despite the strain. She barely registered the searing pain of a glancing shot to her shoulder. There was no time to dwell on it. Darius was at her side, his rifle providing cover as the rest of the team followed. The aliens fought with a newfound ferocity. Threll's crystalline limbs struck with surprising force, shattering enemy weapons and sending attackers sprawling. Ralith darted through the chaos with surprising agility, their plasma pistol firing with growing accuracy. Even the most reluctant members of the alien contingent found themselves swept up in the humans' unyielding momentum. The command center loomed ahead, its reinforced doors sealed tight. Elena motioned for the team to hold position as she approached the control panel beside the entrance. Her fingers worked quickly, bypassing the security protocols with a mix of human ingenuity and brute force. The doors groaned open, revealing the dimly lit interior. "Inside now!" Elena shouted, waving the team forward. They poured into the command center, securing the room in a matter of moments. The humans moved to the control stations, their hands flying over the consoles as they worked to restore the systems. The aliens stood guard, their weapons trained on the entrance in case of pursuit. Elena joined Darius at the main console, her fingers flying over the interface. The screens flickered to life, displaying a chaotic array of data. She sifted through it quickly, her mind racing. "There," she said, pointing to a flashing indicator on the map. "The long-range transmitter is online, but it's running on backup power. We need to reroute the energy from the secondary generators." Darius nodded. "I'll handle it. Keep the comms open." As he moved to the auxiliary station, the tension in the room thickened. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the walls, a reminder that the enemy was still out there, regrouping. Elena's voice cut through the silence as she activated the transmitter. "This is Commander Elena Voss of the human vessel Resolute. Lyrian 7 colony is under attack. Requesting immediate reinforcements. Coordinates are attached." The message repeated on a loop, broadcasting into the void. Elena leaned back, her gaze fixed on the screen. Now all they could do was wait. The silence was broken by a sudden crash. The reinforced doors buckled under a powerful blow, and the team snapped to attention, weapons raised. The enemy had found them. Elena's jaw tightened as she stepped forward, her rifle steady in her hands. "Hold the line. Reinforcements are on their way." The aliens exchanged glances, their fear giving way to resolve. Ralith raised their weapon, standing shoulder to shoulder with Threll. Darius returned to Elena's side, his smirk laced with defiance. "They'll regret pushing us this far," he said. Elena allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Let's show them what happens when they do." As the doors burst open and the enemy poured in, the team braced for the fight of their lives. Every shot fired, every step taken, was a testament to their determination. And though the odds were stacked against them, none of them wavered. Pain was temporary. Survival was everything. And in that moment, they fought not just for themselves, but for each other. For the first time, the galaxy was witnessing the unbreakable spirit of humanity and the strength that came from standing together. The clash within the command center was immediate and ferocious. The invaders surged through the shattered doors in coordinated waves, their reflective armor gleaming like liquid mercury under the flickering lights. Plasma bolts filled the air, searing through consoles and embedding into walls, leaving jagged craters in their wake. Elena dropped to one knee behind an overturned station, her weapon barking a rapid succession of shots. Each pull of the trigger was deliberate, precise. She couldn't afford to waste a single round. "Focus fire on the heavies," she shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. "They're shielding the others." The enemy's formation was tight, their heavy units absorbing damage while lighter troops flanked with unnerving agility. Darius was already on the move, his rifle slung low as he launched a frag grenade into the center of their line. The explosion rocked the room, sending shards of reflective armor flying and breaking their advance. Threll had taken up position near the rear of the group, their crystalline limbs reflecting errant plasma bolts in a dazzling array of colors. Despite their visible exhaustion, they moved with surprising grace, using their natural resilience to shield the more vulnerable members of the team. "Commander," Threll called out, their voice ringing like chimes. "They're regrouping on the left." "I see it," Elena responded. She pivoted, her rifle locking onto the advancing flank. A burst of fire tore through their line, and the aliens hesitated just long enough for Ralph to swoop in, their movements a blur of feathers and fury. The once diplomat fired with remarkable accuracy, a transformation that hadn't gone unnoticed by the rest of the team. The humans fought like demons, their movements synchronized and relentless, but the aliens were no longer just observers. They had become something else, participants, warriors forged in the crucible of combat. And yet, the tide of battle was far from turning. The enemy's numbers seemed endless, their resolve unshaken. "Commander, we're running out of time," Darius shouted over the din, his voice edged with urgency. "We need to hold until reinforcements arrive, but I don't know how much longer we can keep this up." Elena's mind raced. The command center offered limited cover, and the enemy's relentless assault left little room for error. Her team was holding the line, but it wouldn't last. Her gaze flicked to the auxiliary power conduit near the far wall, an idea forming even as plasma bolts zipped past her. "Darius, Threll, cover me," she barked, already moving before they could respond. She sprinted toward the conduit, her steps heavy under the planet's crushing gravity. The enemy noticed her movement and redirected their fire, forcing her to dive behind a half-destroyed console. Sparks erupted around her, and she gritted her teeth against the sting of molten metal. Threll surged forward, their crystalline frame absorbing a volley of plasma bolts meant for Elena. The sound they made, something between a musical note and a low groan, sent a pang of guilt through her, but there was no time to dwell on it. Threll glanced back at her, their refracted light dimmer now, and nodded. "Do what you must." Elena reached the conduit, her hands working frantically to override its manual controls. If she could reroute the auxiliary power, she could overload the station's defense grid. The resulting burst would wipe out everything in the room, friend and foe alike. It was a last resort, but if reinforcements didn't arrive soon, it might be their only chance. "Commander!" Ralitha's voice cut through her thoughts. "More incoming, reinforcements for them." Elena's stomach dropped as she glanced toward the entrance. The enemy forces had doubled, a fresh wave pouring in with terrifying precision. Her team was visibly faltering now, their movement sluggish, their shots less accurate. Even the humans, whose endurance had carried them this far, were reaching their breaking point. Darius fell back to her position, his expression grim but defiant. "Tell me you've got a plan." "I've got something," Elena replied, her voice tight. "But it's going to be messy." "Messy's fine," Darius said, taking up a defensive stance beside her. "Just say the word." The conduit's panel finally unlocked with a hiss, and Elena began rerouting the power. The station's lights flickered wildly, and a low hum began to build, growing louder with each passing second. The enemy seemed to sense something was wrong. Their movements became more frantic, their fire more erratic. "Elena, whatever you're doing, make it quick," Darius shouted, his rifle spitting fire. The hum reached a deafening pitch, and Elena slammed her fist against the final override. "Done! Everyone fall back to the far wall. Now!" The team obeyed without question, dragging the injured with them as they scrambled to the rear of the room. Threll and Ralith were the last to move, covering the retreat with desperate precision. The enemy forces surged forward, unaware of the trap until it was too late. The defense grid detonated with a blinding flash, a wave of energy that swept through the room like a tidal force. The invaders were thrown back, their reflective armor shattering under the impact. The humans and aliens, shielded by the far wall, braced against the shockwave as it roared past them. When the light faded and the hum subsided, the room was eerily silent. The enemy lay scattered, their forces decimated. Elena slumped against the wall, her chest heaving as she tried to catch her breath. The team was battered, bruised, but alive. Darius broke the silence, his voice rough but laced with admiration. "Well, that was one hell of a gamble." Elena managed a faint smile. "Desperate times." Threll approached, their crystalline form dim but intact. "You risked much, Commander. But you saved us." "It's not over yet," Elena said, forcing herself to her feet. Her gaze drifted to the communications console, where the transmitter was still broadcasting her distress signal. Reinforcements should be on their way. We just have to hold a little longer. Ralith's feathers ruffled, their voice surprisingly steady. Then we will hold. Together. For the first time since the mission began, Elena allowed herself a moment of hope. The team, humans and aliens alike, had proven their resilience, their strength. They had endured the impossible and come out the other side. As the faint sound of approaching ships echoed in the distance, Elena tightened her grip on her rifle. The fight wasn't over, but they had already shown the galaxy what they were capable of. And for the first time, the galaxy had begun to understand the price of survival. The silence in the command center was overwhelming, a stark contrast to the chaos that had preceded it. Elena stood amidst the wreckage, the taste of ozone heavy in the air, her heart still pounding in her chest. Her rifle hung loosely in her hand, its familiar weight comforting, even in the aftermath of the battle. The team was regrouping, some tending to their wounds, others assessing the damage. The alien allies, their bodies battered and weary, kept a careful distance, their eyes still scanning the room for threats. Elena didn't let herself relax. She couldn't afford to. The enemy was still out there, somewhere, and they would return soon, more prepared than before. Her mind raced as she glanced over the status readouts on the flickering control panels. The backup power had held longer than expected, but it was rapidly draining, leaving them with precious little time before the station would go dark again. "Commander," Darius's voice broke through her thoughts. He approached, his expression one of grim determination. "The reinforcements are still hours out. We can't just wait around here for them to show up. We need to make sure they don't get the upper hand." Elena met his gaze, her jaw tightening. She knew he was right. They were vulnerable, and the longer they stayed put, the more likely they were to be overwhelmed. Her mind flashed to the images of the enemy's assault. How relentless they had been, how they seemed to grow stronger with each wave. The fire from their weapons had been precise, unyielding, and there was a sense of intelligence behind their tactics that she hadn't expected. "I'm not waiting for them to come to us," Elena said, her voice steady despite the fatigue pulling at her limbs. "We need to push out, take the fight to them before they regroup and reinforce. If we can hit their command structure, we might cripple their ability to retaliate." Darius nodded, clearly expecting nothing less. "You think we've got the strength left for that?" "I don't know," Elena admitted, her gaze sweeping over the exhausted team. "But we can't stay here. Not now. We've made it this far. If we falter now, all of this will be for nothing." Her words rang in the room, hanging in the air for a moment before they settled into resolve. The team, tired as they were, gathered their gear. There was no question about it. They had come this far, and they would finish what they started. Threll stepped forward, their crystalline form dimmer than before, but still formidable. "Commander, we will fight with you. To the end." Ralith, still wincing from the wounds sustained earlier, lowered their head in agreement. Together, Elena nodded, her gaze firm as she turned to the others. The human soldiers, though drained, adjusted their gear with a sense of purpose. They understood what was at stake. This wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for something greater, something that none of them could afford to lose. The storm outside had not let up, its winds howling against the outer walls of the station. Lightning flickered in the distance, illuminating the landscape in jagged bursts of white light. The world outside felt alien, hostile, and Elena could feel the weight of it pressing against her. She keyed in a command to the control panel, bringing up a tactical map of the surrounding area. The enemy's positions were marked in red, their strength still considerable. It was a labyrinth of defenses, and taking them down would require more than just brute force. "We'll need to use the cover of the storm," Elena said, her voice cold with calculation. "It'll make it harder for them to track us, and we'll have the advantage of surprise. But we'll have to move fast." Darius, ever the realist, raised an eyebrow. "You're betting everything on the storm? What if it doesn't work?" "It's our best shot," Elena replied. "We don't have time for anything else." With the plan in place, the group set out. The aliens and humans moved in tandem, each step heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. The storm outside was like a living thing, its fierce winds tugging at their clothes and threatening to throw them off course. It howled through the twisted wreckage of the colony, but it also masked their movements, allowing them to advance without the enemy being alerted. Elena couldn't help but feel a certain sense of urgency with every step they took. They were on borrowed time, and the window of opportunity was rapidly closing. They came upon their first checkpoint, a barricade of makeshift debris manned by a small group of enemy soldiers. Elena gestured for the team to halt and whispered her orders. Darius and Threll would flank the left side, while Ralith and the others would create a distraction from the right. The humans moved with precision, each step calculated, every movement choreographed for maximum efficiency. The aliens, equally skilled in their own right, mirrored the actions, working seamlessly together as one. As Elena advanced toward the barricade, her heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct told her to push forward, but the pressure of leadership weighed on her like a heavy mantle. She had to make sure the team was safe. She had to ensure the mission was a success. The first shots rang out, a volley of plasma fire that splintered the barricade into jagged shards of metal and rock. The enemy soldiers retaliated, but they were unprepared for the coordinated strike that followed. Threll and Darius moved with ruthless efficiency, tearing through the opposition with brutal force. Ralitha's plasma pistol flashed in the darkness, the occasional burst of light illuminating their path as they took down one enemy after another. The battle was over in a matter of minutes, and the checkpoint was secured. Elena breathed a sigh of relief, though it was brief. This was only the beginning. The enemy forces were still out there, still waiting for their chance to strike back. "We move forward," Elena said, her voice unwavering. "Keep your eyes open. We're not out of danger yet." Darius gave her a sharp nod, his face determined. Understood. The team pressed on, navigating through the storm and the wreckage with a quiet intensity. Their path was clear now, but the weight of the mission never left them. Every corner they turned, every step they took, was another step closer to the final confrontation. The enemy might be regrouping, but Elena knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't stop until they completed their goal. And neither would she. The final stretch of their journey was marked by an eerie stillness, the storm outside offering little more than the occasional rumble of thunder as a backdrop to their relentless march. The landscape around them, once a bustling hub of human activity, had been reduced to a battlefield. Every step taken on shattered earth and scorched remnants of what had once been civilization. The team moved in silence, each footfall measured, each breath deliberate. There was no room for hesitation now. Elena's mind was focused on the task ahead. She could feel the weight of her decisions bearing down on her with each step. They were close to the heart of the enemy's position, the command center that had been coordinating the invaders' every move. If they could take it, they could cripple the enemy's operations, force them into retreat, and perhaps, just perhaps, turn the tide of this war. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp hiss from Darius. "Commander, we're close." She nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. The faint outline of a heavily fortified structure loomed in the distance, half hidden by the swirling debris of the storm. It was well guarded, with patrols circling in and out of view, but the storm worked in their favor once again, providing them the cover they needed. The storm's howling winds shielded their movements, but it also made it harder to assess the enemy's full strength. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. Every distant movement could be an enemy scout. "Elena, we don't have much time." Threll's voice cut through her thoughts, and she turned to see the alien diplomats standing tall, despite their visible weariness. "Our strength is waning. If we are to strike, it must be now." Ralith stepped forward, their feathers rustling softly. "We won't last long if we don't act. The enemy is regrouping, and soon they will be prepared for us." Elena felt the weight of their words. The storm had given them an advantage, but it was also slowly wearing them down. They were all exhausted, every member of the team pushed to the limit of their endurance. But there was no turning back now. They had come too far, sacrificed too much, to stop when victory was within their reach. "We'll push forward," Elena said, her voice steady. "Threll, Darius, take the left flank. Ralith, cover the right. I'll lead the center." The team moved into position, their bodies pressed against the cold metal of the ruins as they advanced. The enemy patrols were close, too close for comfort, but the team's discipline kept them moving without hesitation. Elena's heart beat in rhythm with her footsteps, the familiar sense of purpose returning with every step. As they drew closer to the enemy compound, the sounds of the storm and the distant battle faded, leaving only the steady thrum of her pulse in her ears. It was as if time itself had slowed down, each moment stretching longer than the last. Her eyes darted from cover to cover, searching for the next piece of protection, the next escape route. Every move was calculated, deliberate. Then they reached the outer perimeter of the command center, a fortress built into the side of a mountain, surrounded by a series of defensive walls and armed guard posts. The soldiers stationed at the guard posts were not numerous, but they were alert. Every minute spent getting closer to their target felt like an eternity, and Elena knew they couldn't afford to waste another moment. "Get ready," she whispered, signaling the team to move in. Threll and Darius positioned themselves at the left, their weapons ready, their eyes scanning the shadows. Ralith crouched low, keeping to the right side, while Elena advanced at the center, her rifle held steady and her senses sharp. The first guard was unaware, his back turned as he adjusted a sensor. Elena's breath caught for a moment, but she didn't hesitate. A sharp, controlled shot rang out from Darius's rifle, and the guard crumpled to the ground, lifeless. No alarm sounded. No one noticed. The team moved forward. They continued in this fashion, silently taking down guards one by one, each shot muffled by the storm and the roar of their own breathing. It wasn't until they reached the final outer wall that things began to change. The patrols were more frequent now, their movements coordinated. The enemy had sensed something was wrong, and their vigilance had doubled. "We're getting close," Elena muttered, her eyes narrowing as she peered over the wall. The command center was just beyond, its heavy doors guarded by a force far larger than anything they had encountered so far. The final obstacle. "Commander," Threll said, voice soft but firm. "There are too many. We cannot engage them all." Elena didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced, calculating their odds, weighing the consequences of each possible course of action. They had no choice but to breach the doors. If they couldn't get inside, all of this would have been for nothing. "Cover me," she said abruptly, her voice low but resolute. Without waiting for a response, she made her move, darting toward the entrance. The wind howled around her, its biting cold cutting through the fabric of her suit, but she pushed forward, every step bringing her closer to their goal. Darius and Threll provided cover, their weapons flashing as they picked off any soldiers that dared to get too close. The rest of the team moved in tight formation, staying close to the shadows as they advanced. Elena reached the doors first, her hands trembling slightly as she keyed in the override code. The doors groaned, a sound of ancient metal straining against years of neglect. The team closed in, watching every direction as the sound of the storm outside seemed to grow louder, drowning out everything else. Then, with a deafening hiss, the doors slid open, revealing the heart of the command center, an open space filled with consoles and terminals, humming with the power of the enemy's operations. But there was no time to admire the view. The enemy's leadership was there, and they weren't about to let Elena and her team leave alive. Elena's heart thudded in her chest as the enemy forces inside immediately turned their weapons toward them. She raised her rifle, her body moving on instinct as she fired the first shot, and the battle for the command center began.